Um, have you ever launched into a new project or maybe a new mission or calling with just this massive, unstoppable enthusiasm, only to find yourself, I don't know, a few months later feeling like you were just running on an endless treadmill?
Oh, yeah, where that initial passion has somehow morphs into this
Yeah.
really heavy obligation.
Exactly. The fire that got you started just kind of fades into a dull, lingering fatigue. And look, if you are nodding your head right now, or maybe wincing a little bit, you're definitely not alone.
No, not at all. It's a remarkably common experience, actually. And it points to a deeper structural issue in how we approach our work, our leadership, and really our spiritual lives. We tend to treat energy like it's an infinite resource.
Right up until the moment the tank is completely dry.
Exactly.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a truly fascinating source document today titled Prayer, Worship, and Witness Rhythms. And the mission of this deep dive is to really explore this quiet crisis of burnout. We want to discover the spiritual architecture, those intentional, repeatable rhythms that you actually need to sustain long-term focus and vitality.
Yeah, and it's so relevant right now.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. The core thesis here is profound. Most initiatives, whether they're ministries, nonprofits, or just personal callings, they don't fail from a lack of vision.
Right.
They don't fail because of a poor strategy or bad marketing. They fail because the inner life fueling them slowly erodes.
That is the crux of it. I mean, we are living in an era of just accelerated fatigue, information overload, constant cultural fragmentation. It's the water we swim in.
Yeah.
Teens are overwhelmed, attention spans are entirely fractured,
Yeah.
and the foundational premise from our source text gives us a stark warning about this exact environment. It says, mission becomes machinery when urgency replaces intimacy.
Mission becomes machinery.
Right. When the sheer panic of getting things done completely overrides the quiet work of knowing why you're doing them, you stop being a human on a mission and you just turn into a cog in a machine.
We get so obsessed with what the material calls execution mode. It's totally our modern default. We plan, we mobilize, we organize, evaluate.
Constant evaluation.
Always. We're tracking metrics, tweaking onboarding processes, refining methods. And we just assume that spiritual practices like prayer or stillness are just kind of a warm-up.
Yeah, we treat prayer like reading the terms and conditions on a software update.
That's the perfect way to describe it.
You scroll rapidly to the bottom, hit I agree, and try to get to the actual work as fast as humanly possible.
But the argument here is that the terms and conditions are the software.
Yes, and treating them as an afterthought is precisely why we burn out. The early church, they operated on a completely different blueprint, which is honestly kind of hard for our hyper-productive minds to even grasp.
Yeah.
Antioch is a perfect case study for this. You have this cosmopolitan city, ethnically diverse, commercially vibrant, strategically located, and the leadership team there was an absolute powerhouse. You have Barnabas from Cyprus, Simeon from Africa, Saul from Tarsus.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That is a total dream team for launching a global expansion strategy.
Oh, absolutely.
If you put those guys in a room today, they would be at a whiteboard with dry erase markers, mapping out demographic targets, setting up a donor CRM, drafting this massive 5-year scaling plan. But before sending out Paul and Barnabas on what literally became a world-changing missionary journey, they didn't brainstorm expansion plans at all.
Not even a little bit.
They worshipped and fasted.
It is a profound indictment of our modern boardroom mentality.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit actually interrupts their devotion with a directive to set apart Barnabas and Saul.
The strategic direction emerged organically out of the prayer.
Exactly. The prayer room was the boardroom. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the identical pattern in the life of Jesus. Look at Matthew chapter 9, when Jesus is looking out at the harassed and helpless crowds.
Yeah, and when you dig into the original language there, the word for his compassion, it's sputtering. It isn't just this polite, fleeting sense of pity.
No, it's visceral.
It's a gut-level mercy, a deep physical stirring in the absolute core of his being. It's a kind of empathy that physically hurts.
What's fascinating here is his immediate response to that overwhelming, physically painful empathy. When Jesus felt that visceral mercy, he didn't immediately launch a recruitment drive.
Right.
He didn't turn to the disciples and assign them quadrants of the city to go fix. He commanded them to pray to the Lord of the harvest. He put the focus entirely back on dependence.
Which is the hardest thing to do when everything is screaming that there's an urgent crisis to solve right this second.
It is entirely counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And that is the crucial takeaway for you, the listener. Prayer isn't preparation for the mission, it is participation in it.
I love that.
Strategy without surrender is really just self-reliance disguised as excellence. When we flip the script, these spiritual disciplines stop being optional add-ons for the super-religious. They become the actual load-bearing infrastructure of the mission.
Speaking of infrastructure, there's this great metaphor used to describe this in the text. Think about your physical body. You can have the best vision in the world, the clearest goals, a totally sharp mind. But if your respiratory system or your circulatory system shuts down,
You aren't going anywhere.
exactly. Sustained mission requires an interwoven spiritual ecosystem. And the material breaks this down into three core rhythms: inhalation, the heartbeat, and exhalation. So breathing in is the first step, which is prayer.
When we talk about prayer as inhalation, we're talking about drawing in life and aligning our hearts with a broader reality. But there's a vital distinction made here. The challenge is to move from generic prayer to specific intercession.
Because generalized prayer often produces generalized compassion.
Right, which doesn't actually sustain anyone.
It really makes you wonder if our default to generic prayers like "Lord bless the whole world" or "God save the city" is actually a subconscious defense mechanism.
Oh, that's interesting.
Think about it. If I pray for the whole world, I don't have to take emotional responsibility for the single mom struggling right next door. It's safer. It keeps the pain at arm's length.
That is a piercing observation. Vague prayers keep us insulated. But the biblical model forces proximity. The Apostle Paul, in Romans 10, he prays specifically for Israel. He names his burden out loud.
And the historical examples in the text are even more striking. Hudson Taylor, the founder of the China Inland Mission, he didn't just pray generally for China, he kept specific, name-based intercession lists for unreached towns and individual converts.
And the Moravian missionaries did the exact same thing.
Oh, we have to talk about the Moravians because their story is insane in the best possible way. In 1727, in this small village in Germany called Herrnhut, they started a 247 prayer watch.
A prayer watch that lasted for over 100 years. Unbroken.
Let's just pause and think about the sheer logistics of that. We are talking about the 1700s. No digital calendars, no smartphone reminders, no Slack channels to coordinate shifts.
Just raw dedication.
You have ordinary people waking up at 2 a.m. in the freezing winters of Saxony, walking to a designated spot to take an hour-long shift, and then handing the baton to the next person, day and night, through wars, famines, cultural revolutions for a century. And they knew exactly which villages and which households they were praying for. They built a hyper-specific relational map of spiritual need.
That kind of endurance doesn't happen through spontaneous bursts of inspiration. It happens through structure. And that specificity transforms compassion from a vague sentiment into a burning relational love.
Yes.
To bring this into our modern context, the document highlights the practice of prayer walks.
Right, and the point of a prayer walk isn't the physical exercise. It's about cultivating incarnational awareness. You're looking for the unseen architecture of a neighborhood's pain or joy. You aren't just praying abstractly in your bedroom. You're praying for the actual complex reality right in front of you. You are breathing in an awareness of specific people.
But breathing in is only half the survival equation. If that empathy and awareness doesn't get pumped through the system, it stagnates. You just end up overwhelmed by the needs of the world.
So true.
That brings us to the heartbeat worship, to circulate that awareness and realign our identity.
The encounter the prophet Isaiah had in Isaiah chapter 6 is the ultimate masterclass in this. It completely inverts our modern leadership pipeline.
Totally backwards from how we do it today.
Today, we recruit first based on competency. We hand someone a microphone or a project, and we just kind of hope their character catches up later. Isaiah's blueprint demands complete identity destruction and reconstruction before a single task is assigned.
The sequence in Isaiah 6 is profound. First, there's a vision of absolute holiness. Isaiah sees the Lord high and exalted, and that vision of holiness instantly exposes his own pride and his self-reliance.
His immediate reaction isn't to ask for a blessing or a promotion. It's a devastating realization. He literally says, "Woe is me, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips." It is the ultimate anti-resume.
He recognizes his complete inadequacy when faced with true perfection.
Yeah.
Despair could easily take over there. But the encounter doesn't end in destruction. Next comes cleansing by grace. A seraph touches Isaiah's lips with a live coal, symbolizing painful but necessary purification.
And only after the vision, the confession, and the cleansing does the commissioning happen.
Right. God asks whom he should send, and Isaiah, now empty of his ego but full of grace, replies, "Here am I, send me."
Encounter precedes action. Cleansing precedes commissioning. This completely redefines worship. The material uses Romans 12.1 and 2 to frame worship not as a Sunday morning musical performance, but as a living sacrifice.
It's daily.
It's daily ethical and relational surrender. It's how you respond to an angry email. It's how you treat a waiter. It's the quiet ethical choices nobody sees. That is the heartbeat pumping life through the ecosystem.
Which naturally sets up the final component of the ecosystem. If you inhale through specific prayer and your heart beats with a surrendered ethical worship, you naturally have to exhale. That exhalation is witness.
And the relief here is that witness isn't framed as a marketing strategy. It's not a quota. You don't have to feel guilty because you didn't hand out a certain number of pamphlets or casually force a spiritual conversation into a chat about the weather.
No, witness is the natural, inevitable overflow of communion.
Right.
The Greek word used for witness is martyria. It implies bearing evidence to what one has genuinely seen and experienced. If you have actually encountered grace through prayer and worship, sharing that reality becomes an overflow of joy.
It stops being a heavy burden of duty or a sales pitch. You're simply reporting on a reality you inhabit. So what does this all mean? We have this beautiful concept of a spiritual ecosystem. Inhale, heartbeat, exhale. But how do you actually build this? How do you keep it going when life gets incredibly busy and your inbox is just overflowing?
That brings us to the concept of building a rule of life. And the central tension here is that we often view structure as a prison, but historically, structure equals freedom.
The word rule comes from the Latin regula, which was a piece of wood used as a straight edge or a ruler. But in an agricultural sense, it was a trellis.
A trellis doesn't restrict a vine. It gives the vine the structure it needs to lift it off the dirt so it can bear fruit.
Yeah.
Without the trellis, the vine just tangles itself on the ground and rots.
That reframes everything. A rule of life isn't a spreadsheet of guilt. It's a trellis for your soul.
And this concept is deeply rooted in historical precedent. The Benedictine monks in the 6th century crafted a rule to structure daily prayer, manual labor, and study, which literally preserved Western civilization through the Dark Ages. John Wesley's Methodist movement relied heavily on structured routines, 2-class meetings, morning and evening prayer, rigorous financial giving, all to prevent spiritual drift. They were called Methodists as an insult because they were so methodical about their spiritual habits.
And today, we need that trellis more than ever because the friction of our world is literally designed to distract us. The material organizes this into a framework of daily, weekly, and monthly rhythms. So daily, you have scripture meditation, intercessory prayer, naming those actual names, and taking time for silence.
Sitting in silence might be the most countercultural act possible today. Just listening to the Spirit without the crutch of a podcast or a playlist.
So hard to do.
Then weekly, the framework calls for engaging in corporate worship gathering physically with community and actively observing a Sabbath rest.
And monthly involves setting aside time for extended solitude, fasting, and a deeper reflection to recalibrate your direction. I have to admit, the idea of extended solitude is terrifying for a lot of people.
Oh, definitely.
The sheer terror of being alone with your own thoughts, without a phone to numb the anxiety. But that is exactly where the recalibration happens. Still, I know human nature. I can start a new, beautiful trellis on Monday, and by Thursday, I've completely fallen off the wagon and I'm back to doom scrolling. How do we make this stick?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at Hebrews 10.24-25, which urges believers to stir one another up to love and good works. Solo Christianity is a modern myth. These rhythms simply cannot survive in isolation.
They need a community.
The absolute necessity of accountability pairs and covenant groups is highlighted as the anchor for all of this.
You literally pair up with someone. You meet weekly, you share your actual struggle, not the sanitized versions. You share your prayer lists and you check in on those daily and weekly rhythms.
Accountability pairs turn your private, fragile, individual devotion into a corporate, resilient culture. When you are faltering under the weight of a difficult season, your partner sustains your rhythm. When they're exhausted, you carry them. You become the external scaffolding for each other's inner life.
Okay, so we've flipped the script on strategy. We understand the inhale, heartbeat, and exhale of the spiritual ecosystem. And we have a structural trellis, a rule of life to keep it going, anchored by community. But there is one massive, glaring hurdle left. And that is how we measure success. There is a huge danger in performance-driven leadership, which most of us have been thoroughly marinated in.
It's perhaps the most insidious trap for any mission-driven individual or organization today. We naturally default to operating like secular startups.
We measure our spiritual vitality by attendance numbers, by revenue, by how many followers we have, or how fast we're scaling our influence. And when we do that, our identity becomes entirely tied to our output. We start asking, are we growing? Are we visible? Are we going viral? Instead of asking, are we abiding? Are we listening?
This raises an important question. If we discard those secular output-based metrics, how should we measure spiritual vitality? Because we do still need to know if our mission is healthy and effective.
Right. And we are given a completely alternative set of metrics, true indicators of health that are much harder to fake. First, look for increased participation in corporate prayer. Not just how many people show up to the main event with the lights and the music, but are people actually showing up just to pray together in the quiet moments?
A second powerful indicator is documented testimonies of spirit-led conversations and opportunities. Are people in the community experiencing divine nudges in their everyday lives, at the grocery store, in the workplace, at a gym, and actually acting on them?
That's a great metric.
And more importantly, are those stories being shared and celebrated, establishing a culture of expectation?
A third metric is observing the leadership pipeline. Are new leaders emerging organically from a place of deep, visible devotion? Or are they just being recruited through programmatic pressure to fill an empty slot on an organizational spreadsheet?
And finally, perhaps the most radical metric of all, sustained joy and decreased burnout among the team.
Using sustained joy as a key performance indicator is wild. Think about that for a second. If joy is your KPI, you manage your team completely differently. You don't squeeze them for every drop of productivity. You look and ask, are the people serving spiritually energized, or are they quietly, deeply exhausted behind their smiles?
Jesus said, apart from me, you can do nothing. Burnout is often the clearest, most painful signal that the branch has become disconnected from the vine. It means the execution mode has completely overtaken the communion mode.
To wrap this all up, the ultimate goal here isn't to just add more spiritual activities to an already busy schedule. Trying to squeeze more religious tasks into a burned-out life is the exact opposite of the point.
Yes, it's about foundation.
The goal is to build a life architecture, a rule of life that can carry a sustained mission. Because passion, no matter how genuine, how fiery, or how pure at the start, burns hot and eventually burns out. But rhythm endures.
Mission simply cannot survive on momentum alone. Momentum fades the moment the terrain gets difficult. It requires steady, life-giving patterns of communion that tether us to our purpose when our feelings inevitably fluctuate.
I want to challenge you, the listener, to take a hard, honest look at your own life right now. Look at your current rhythms, the way you pray, the way you work, the way you rest, the way you consume information. If those exact rhythms remained completely unchanged for the next 5 years, what would the inevitable result be? Would you grow more spiritually resilient, more joyful, and more deeply connected to your calling? Or would you end up quietly, cynically exhausted?
It's a sobering question, but an absolutely necessary one. We rarely drift toward spiritual strength. We almost always drift toward depletion. Intentional rhythms are what prevent that drift.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day, something that builds on everything we've just unpacked about the architecture of a sustainable life. If momentum is the spark that starts the fire and rhythm is the log that keeps it burning, what happens when you finally stop blowing frantically on the embers yourself and simply trust the rhythm to sustain the flame?